Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast, episode 23. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Well, welcome everybody to Cybersafe Digest, episode 23. I'm Martin Roberts, Managing Director of Newways, and I'm here with my colleague,
Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at Newways.
Okay, well, I hope everybody's had a good week. I am going to turn things on their head, Toby. It's very radical, but we normally finish with acronym of the week, and we're going to do it first this time.
Yes.
Okay, and the acronym is TOR, T-O-R, and you're going to explain what it is.
Yeah, it stands for the Onion Router or Onion Router, as our across the pond colleagues.
And I presume that's not a woodworking tool.
It's not. No, it's not. And the reason we flipped it around is that the topic for today is incorporates Tor, and to have the acronym of the week after we spoke around it would kind of make no sense. So
yeah, we saw that, didn't we? We saw that coming. This is foresight on our part.
Preempting.
So what is it? What's Tor?
Okay, so Tor is essentially the means with which you would use to get into the dark web, and that's the topic today, talking around the dark web. And I think it's important to give a little bit of background around some of these things so that we can kind of then understand where they sit and whether really it is the horrible place that everyone says that it is, or whether actually there's any positive aspect to it. So way back, like a lot of these things, like the internet, the Tor network was built out of a US defense initiative.
Okay.
So they needed to provide a way for their undercover operatives to be able to communicate back to base and not have those messages intercepted or be decrypted in any way. And in order to do that, they built up a network with multiple levels and layers of encryption, which was, for all intents and purposes, unbreakable. So their spies and their secret agents could talk to home, knowing that whatever they said was completely indecipherable. The problem was that those unfriendly mostly, but sometimes friendly states that they were operating in could see this traffic running across their networks, and it stood out like a sore thumb.
Okay.
This super duper encrypted network that's got this behavior is happening. So we must have some secret agents operating in our country.
But just for clarity, that they're saying they could see traffic, but they couldn't see what the traffic.
Correct. Yeah. So it was all encrypted, but they could see that there was heavily encrypted traffic moving around in an unusual way across their country's networks. And maybe less of a surprise if you're sat in Russia and you see this traffic, because you kind of expect the US military to be snooping around. But maybe if it's in the UK, or if it was in France or Germany or one of the allies, these people may be operating in those countries, not necessarily nefariously, but it may not be through any kind of pre-agreement.
Okay, and just as a question, really, is this an entirely separate network to the internet, or is it part of the internet?
It runs on the internet backbone. So I'll explain it a bit more. So this became an apparent thing. So it was although the foreign states couldn't see what was being sent, they could see that something was happening, and so they were able to change the way that they were monitoring within their own borders. And so what was the US government decided to do to mitigate this, or to obfuscate things, was they made the Tor software open source, available to anybody that wanted to operate in a discreet and private way. So then their traffic would be hidden alongside lots of other people's traffic and wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb so much.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they were kind of hiding in plain sight, I suppose, is one way of putting it. So privacy advocates initially jumped on board with this. They didn't want people to know where they were going, what they were doing, that kind of thing. But of course, then people have got something to hide, then start piggybacking off the back of it and start to use it for nefarious purposes, because it is very hard to see what's going inside and working out who's going where with it. So it's really, really tricky. And the way that the Tor network works is once you install the software, you become a Tor node. And what that means is the traffic can route through your machine. And so where you see in the movies and they're trying to track down the hackers and it's bouncing off lots of different countries, it's kind of how it works. It's bouncing off lots of different locations. So it's really difficult to understand where the source and destination is. And each of those different bounces has a different layer of encryption. So it gets harder and harder and harder to try and break into that data stream.
Okay, so we're now talking about what is commonly known as the dark web, which is normally represented on TV news items by somebody in a hoodie with their face obscured and Matrix style
text running down the screen. Yeah,
absolutely. And they talk about the threat of the dark web, where actually the dark web is a subset of the web.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of access and the tools that run within that access.
Yeah, and because of the proliferation of ransomware, a lot of threat actors have used the dark web to cover their tracks, to mask payment systems, even to sell things, and that's kind of where it gets its rep from is buying bad stuff on the dark web, and that absolutely does happen. So to talk about the dark web, everything runs on the internet.
Yes.
Then we've got the normal web, which is the stuff that you access every day.
Via we'll call a normal browser.
Yeah, but through your Chrome or your Edge or your Firefox or Safari or whatever it is, and you can type something into your favorite search engine, and the search engines are indexing the normal web, so they will then return results from those.
Sure.
We then have what we call the deep web, which is stuff that is on the normal internet, but it isn't being indexed by the search engines for various reasons.
That's a subject for a later discussion.
Maybe.
It's important, but not so important to this discussion.
Yeah, correct. Correct. And then we then get the dark web, which runs on the internet, but it's a heavily set of encrypted servers and clients, and you need a special browser to be able to go and participate. And unlike the normal internet, you don't really have this notion of a search engine, so you kind of have to know where you're going. So in some ways, it's a little bit like by invite only. You need to know where you're going to see the content. A lot of the stuff is often invitation only.
Yeah,
particularly if it's nefarious content, because they don't just want the police rolling up at a forum that's selling illicit materials.
It would be inconvenient.
It would be for those operators, yes. But the other thing, and this is kind of the I have this firm belief that humanity always intends to do things for good, and invariably human nature drags them into the bad side.
We'll talk about your moral compass and your thoughts on philosophical thoughts on that at some point. That's now, but it's interesting.
Well, and the reason that I say that is that we hear about the dark web, in the news and in the media, and it's being used by this attack group or for this piece of malware or for this kind of illegal material, whether it be weapons or contract killers or worse. But the other side is that it's actually stems back to its original privacy elements, and places like the New York Times, they have a site on the dark web so that whistleblowers can anonymously report information and they can't be tracked back.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, there is a Facebook on the dark web. It's a bit of a sad, cool thing, but when you create a site on the dark web, you are randomly given an address.
Yeah.
So it's a string of characters, and it always ends .onion. That's just the way that it works. So what Facebook did is they programmatically built and tore down sites until they got Facebook.onion over and over and over and over and over again until they got Facebook.onion, which I think is pretty cool.
Okay. So just to clarify that, so they kept creating sites until
they got the one they wanted.
Randomly,
until it random. So it's like this, about 1,000 chimps banging on a typewriter, and eventually will create the work of Shakespeare. It's that kind of thing. Just continue banging away until it crops up.
Okay, so we now understand that the dark web, alongside the deep web, is part of the web, and that access to it is through a special browser or a browser for that purpose, which has added layers of encryption. And we know that, I can understand the libertarian desire for privacy and things like that. Certainly, if you browse on anything. So I've been looking at something recently I've been rewiring my house. Went onto a browser, went onto one retailer, bought something. Now I can't get onto the internet without having adverts from them. And I know that's cookies and things like that. But so why would our people who listen to this podcast, why would they come across the dark web? Why would they be dragged into having to understand what's going on or where the information is?
So there's a couple of things. So the first thing, and it's probably one of the ones that we hear about a lot, is credentials being sold on the dark web. And you'll see that various people offer services, and there's even free utilities out there where you can put your email address in and it'll tell you if your details exist on the dark web.
Yes.
And what happens is that when there's been a data breach, whoever has stolen the data often hosts it for sale on the dark web so that like-minded individuals may offer them some amount of cash for it. And it may be, depending on the size and the tastiness of the dump, it may just be $5, $10, $20. So people aren't getting rich by selling credentials, which is why they sell lots and lots of bundles of credentials. Yeah. So that's where most people hear from it. And
let's just to be absolutely clear, credentials in our world is the username, the password. It could be other information about the person.
Yeah. So we say credentials. Actually, that's a slight misnomer. It could be any PII about the individual as well. So personally identifiable information.
Okay.
So we saw recently that Leicester Council has been hit with ransomware, and they believe they've been had data breached.
Yes.
And they are throwing out all kinds of half-cock information around, how you be prepared for the scammers to be getting. And that'll be how that data that's been taken about you, name and address and phone numbers and all those other things, they'll be sold as part of a data dump bundle, probably on the dark web, and somebody will use that to construct a convincing scam to target you with. And we layer that with what we spoke about, AI getting really good at fabricating these things so they seem legitimate data and legitimately presented format. Maybe the difference between it being successful or not. So
and it's a numbers game, because at the end of the day, if they can send out a phishing email to 100,000 people and they get a success rate of 1%, that could still be quite lucrative. Thank you.
Oh, exactly. I mean, in this particular case, there'll be people, and we don't know exactly what data's gone, but they only have to send out a series of messages that purport to be from the council. Send it out to I think they said 50, it was either 25 or 50,000 individuals have been breached. You send that out to everyone saying, regarding your recent request for an allotment. It seems completely innocuous, but one person in that, if they've requested one and they say, click here to make the payment, do credit card details in, thank you very much, on we go.
It's been lovely. Thank you.
So it is definitely the numbers game, and it's almost like a Russian roulette or that perfect storm. Eventually, that everything will coalesce to it being too good to be true. So, yes.
So that's one of the risks people face, is that their information is somehow gathered, and we know that there's data breaches going all the time, and we know that data gets sold on the dark web. And just a quick diversion here, the ability to, or the method of selling on the dark web is actually quite commercial. I mean, we talk about by invitation only, and we think about people in hoodies with the Matrix style graphics in the background. But I mean, people put together professional looking packages.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There is almost certainly equivalents of eBay or Amazon on the dark web with that are selling. Normally they're selling some kinds of nefarious service. So one of the things we see reported around a lot is ransomware as a service.
Yes.
So a small group of clever people put together a piece of ransomware and a framework for delivering that.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is supply the credentials. Someone will come and rent that from you.
Brilliant.
And they take a cut of whatever you make, basically.
It's fantastic.
But they'll even have a help desk service, so that if your ransomware campaign fails to execute, you can contact them and say, "Why didn't it work? I did everything you said."
Money back guarantees as well. Who knows?
Exactly.
Who knows? Exactly. Okay, so there's that, and then one of the things that people. I was watching a TV show last night, a Scandi Noir, very interesting. Where somebody had to pay a ransom demand in cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And what was remarkable is they managed it in 34 seconds. I suspect in real life that wouldn't.
No, I think unless you're familiar with cryptocurrency, it would probably might take you 34 days to do it. So one of the difficult things is if you're not familiar with cryptocurrency, and this is some of the services that insurance companies can help with.
Yes.
Helping make payments for you, is it's actually quite difficult to get stuff set up, and particularly if you don't really know what you're doing or how to start off. The ransomware note, if you get hit, will helpfully say, make the payment to this address. I'll really not tell you how to do it. And if they've given you this 24 hours, 48 hours time limit before the price doubles or they delete all the data or whatever, then you can be really up against it to do that. So yeah, that's one of the things that often people advocate for is whether you intend to pay it or not, make sure you know how to pay for something in cryptocurrency. Get the things set up before you need them. Or if your insurance company offers that service, check if they do, because that might save you having to do it yourself.
Which refers to things we've talked about in other podcasts, really, about making sure that you are insured and that the insurance will meet your needs. Okay, so the chances are that my data and your data, some of my data and some of your data is on the dark web right now.
Yeah, possible.
Yeah, because I've had services where people have written to me and said, "Oh, Martin, I'm afraid we've had a data breach," and this is. I go and change my passwords immediately. I change my passwords. I use a password manager. What other protections can you and I take, and our listeners take, to make sure that we don't become victims ourselves of the dark web in that sense?
Yeah, so probably, and it's to the point that you mentioned, probably one of the biggest risks is those credentials being reused. So if you've got a username and password that you use for site A and you have site B and site D, and it also happens to be the password used for logging into your company systems, then a breach of one is a breach of all of them potentially. That's the jackpot for an attacker. If they can see that you've used a company email address to sign into a well-known business social media site, and that data gets breached, you can be certain that that's one of the things that will get tried straight away to see if that same credential works on your 365 or your corporate systems. So kind of expands on that password management piece. Unique passwords for every site. Password managers make that really practical.
They do, and easy. Absolutely.
And easy. A lot of them also have a breach monitoring service in there, so they'll tell you if credentials have been detected on the dark web through their monitoring services. Now, the problem with dark web monitoring services is that they're very variable.
Yeah.
They only know what they know about. Yeah. And people are looking at different things and different places. And often there's that real balance between the researcher burning their bridges to say, oh, look, I found all these credentials, because ultimately it's going to be clear that someone on the inside is leaking the information out. So yeah, unique credentials, absolutely. Multi-factor authentication, because even if the password does get breached, it's another layer of authentication that's required. So
we've talked about this before, having a device in your possession, like a mobile phone, where you'll get a pop-up message to authenticate that it's you holding it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and they're probably the two biggest things you can do, and just be vigilant. It's easy to say, but keep an eye out for those emails that say there has been a data breach and you may be in it. Local authorities, utility services, those types of organisations should be very good at communicating. The ICO mandates that they have to.
Yeah.
Overseas organisations probably less so.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for those notifications and use a password manager, unique credentials, MFA. And if there's any doubt, just change that password.
Okay. And the one thing I advocate quite strongly is have a separation, if you can, between your work life and your home life, your personal life, with separate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And sometimes it does blur a little bit, but certainly things like supermarket shopping and Facebook and things like that, unless you are actually using it for company purposes, don't use your company email address.
Just don't
on that.
Okay. Well, it's been quite fascinating, Toby. Thank you very much. I think it's a skim over the dark web, a high flight over. We are probably all affected by the dark web in some way, but we never come across it directly. But
no, in fact, probably the one thing I would say is off the back of this is don't go out looking for it, because there's bad people on there. Yeah. And you just open yourself up potentially to something bad happening.
And we talk about bad we always think about criminality in terms of hacking and the risk to computer networks and to computing in a business. Fascinating subject. Thank you very much, Toby, and thank you very much for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 23. of our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.